Today we're talking mariachi music, tradition, dreams, and dreamers. As the San Jose Mariachi Festival celebrates its 19th year, it honors the bicentennial of Mexico with a salute to Soldaderas, the women who through the centuries have stood up, been counted, and made a difference. And who better to talk about tradition, strong women, and making a difference than two iconic women who walked different paths, but who might be more alike than you know. Singer-songwriter Linda Ronstadt and Dolores Huerta, the co-founder of the United Farm Workers and a soldadera in her own sentido, who will be honored at the festival this year. What is it about mariachi music that people fall in love with?
It gives you who you are. You know, I've seen it happen time and again, where the audience, you know, that we'd start and they would just get really Mexican. You know, they'd get a lot of Mexican in their spine and they'd just sit up real straight and be proud. And I just thought, if there was anything that I did in my whole career, that's the thing I was the most proud of, that I made people feel proud that they're Mexican, you know, or that that's their heritage. Because I was always proud of it. I mean, I grew up in Tucson. I had the luxury of that. Tucson had a very different relationship business-wise with the border. Because of the fact that until they built the railroad, they brought stuff in from Guaymas. It had come on the boat. And so you had to have good relationships with the merchants in northern Mexico if you were in southern Arizona in order to survive. And so, and my dad being Mexican-American, of course, we knew all the ranchers and all the families on the other side of the line. It was, you know, people, my mother would run across the line to have lunch and to shop and to do everything. I mean, it was an invisible line. It didn't take you didn't have to be strip searched and stand on line for 4 hours like it is now. Mariachi can do anything. It's, you know, I can take it anywhere. I can tour with a mariachi. I can play Carnegie Hall, and I can play State Fair. And it sounds, in fact, it's even a little better at the State Fair, because that's where it was to start with. You know, right, exactly. I used to sing at Pico Rivera. I'd sing at a charreada, and I'd ride side saddle. I'd sing riding the horse, you know, fearing for my life. So.
Dolores, you know, music and theater were very much a part of the farm worker movement. So was mariachi music central to, I mean, how was it for you growing up?
Well, the first time I heard mariachis was in Mexico, in Guadalajara. And it was at this beautiful lake, the Chapala. And I heard this music, and I wondered where it was coming from. And I looked for a jukebox, and I looked for a radio, and found neither. And this music sounded like it was coming from heaven. It was like angelic music, and I ran around, and then I ran outside, and there was a mariachi out there. The first time I'd ever heard mariachi music. And after that, I totally fell in love with it. But, you know, when we were marching on those long marches with Cesar, and we'd be going 20 miles marching in the hot sun, going up the San Joaquin Valley, and you get really, really tired. And as we would be approaching the town, they would have the mariachis. And right away, everybody was just uplifted, and all of a sudden, you weren't tired anymore, because the music just lifted you up and gave you the kind of energy you needed to just, you know, go up that final mile or 2 miles to get into the town. And so it has a very magical quality about it. And what I like the most about the mariachi phenomenon, I'll call it, the fact that it is now spread all over the United States. I was in Washington State the other day doing some work on the census. I was in Tucson, Arizona, where they have a mariachi in every single school, grammar school and high school. And to see those children that are playing this mariachi music and what it means to their self-esteem, and for them being able to connect, you know, back to their roots, and in a very positive way, in a way that really, like the music uplifts us, it uplifts them in terms of their self-esteem and their pride in being Mexican.
You know, the school was part of the original dream of the Latino community organizers of the Mexican Heritage Corporation and Plaza. And I know that back then, 19 years ago, before that, as they were thinking about a mariachi festival, they went to Tucson to check it out and to bring it back.
Tucson was the first one. My dad took me, I think, to the second one they ever had. Lola Beltran, who is my role model for singing, my great, you know, idol, was singing. And so that was the first chance I'd ever had to see her live. So the Tucson Festival gave me the chance to meet the mariachi groups that I admire, like Mariachi Vargas. I never get a chance to meet them. Otherwise, they had no idea who I was. If I went down to Mexico and said, hey, I want to make a record with you, you know. So the Tucson Festival, which is what made it possible for me to do Canciones de mi Padre. Mm-hmm. And I'm very grateful to them for that.
So they visioned it, they brought it to San Jose. Yeah. It's been there. Then you came in 4 years ago. What was your vision and your thinking? What were you going to bring to it?
The festival?
Yeah.
Well, The music is really important, but there's more music that comes out of I like the idea of Mexican cultural festival, cultural heritage festival, because mariachi is, is the shining centerpiece of Mexican music. But there are many different regions that have fabulous different styles. There's jarocho music, and there's huapango. There's all this different stuff. So, and I think that all of those kinds of regions should be celebrated. Plus, there's this new music that's made because the two countries live side by side, and there's the influence of the two countries back and forth across the border, in spite of the wall that they're building, that create a virtual third country. There's the country of Aztlan, we like to call it, or the country of the Chicanos, and it's influencing the original two cultures. And they have their own music. Guys like Los Lobos, that's pure Chicano. I mean, those guys are just great. They're just trailblazers. And Dan Guerrero's father, Lalo Guerrero, a very close friend of my dad's, the father of Chicano music, he was the first to have great success with this kind of amazing new blend of these two cultures.
And I just want to say that Linda is the embodiment, I believe, of as you mentioned, of bringing all of these cultures together. And she's such an important figure in our community for what she stands for, not only the mariachi music, but always paying respect to the culture and coming back to the culture. This means so much, especially in these days when our community, the Latino community, is being bashed upon so much, and all of this anti-immigrant campaign that has been going on, that people like Linda and the music and all that really gives us back our pride.
It's really hard to talk to the two of you. We're starting with music, and now we've suddenly become political and talking about social causes. So it's lovely to see this go-round here. And I imagine that with the theme of the festival this year, which is about soldaderas, there's also another little bit of politicalization there.
Well, it's really important to be a student of history, know whose shoulders you're standing on. Each generation, it just takes a generation to forget. What Dolores and Cesar Chavez did for the farm workers cannot be forgotten. And already, they're kids 15 years old, they don't know this history. What we're celebrating this year is that in a very, very macho country, the women were the quartermasters. They would encourage the men to bring their wives. A soldier without a woman to come along and feed him was useless. They made the tortillas. They were probably out stealing, shooting, or gathering the food. Because there wasn't any government behind the revolutionary soldiers that was supplying them with food or with the things they needed. So the women went along. They rode along the top of the train because they needed the middle of the train for the horses. The horses couldn't ride without shelter. Without the horses, the army was unhorsed. So, the women were the last on the totem pole. But in a very macho society, what would happen is that not only were they soldier girls, they were fighting, they were doing the shooting, but if the colonel, fell, well, his wife picked up his 30-30, and she directed that she was leading the troops, just like Dolores went and wrote the contracts, negotiated the contracts. When I read about the history of the growers that feared you because you were not going to give them any quarter, how tough a negotiator you were. I mean, she was doing that, and she was up on the cars on the top of the cars yelling at the farm workers to get out of the fields, when they were having a strike. So for a woman to be in that position of authority and command in such a macho society, that's a big change. And you part of you hopes that nobody notices it, so that they'll do what you're asking them to do. And the other part of you hopes that maybe it'll empower other women as well, because, if you keep women out of the equation, you lose a lot of good talent and intellectual vigor.
One of the most lovely times is when the kids get on the stage with the musicians and get to play. I mean, that makes them probably feel so great, stand up tall and be proud. Well, the school has been very successful in that way.
Well, it has been. I mean, the mariachi tradition, it's written. I mean, those good bands like the Cobre or the Camperos or the Mariachi Vargas, you're going to go to a symphony and you're not going to find a better musicians. They're all virtuoso players. But and it's written, they're all good readers. But there's an approach to the rhythm that is, you got to learn it from a master. It's got to be handed down from hand to hand, And that's what we try to do with those workshops, is that those little kids, we can't teach them from the beginning, but we can teach them, they can have that weekend in an intense way to stand next to one of the masters and see how it's done.
The Mariachi Festival theme this year is focused on the soldadera. Now, this was the female soldier who went into combat alongside men during the Mexican Revolution. The majority of these women led ordinary lives, but took up arms during the fight, the war for freedom, and became extraordinary creatures. So, Linda, why did you decide to focus on the Soldadera as the theme this year?
Well, since it was the 100th anniversary of the revolution, we knew we had to pay some attention to that. But what I really was thinking about was, what did the women endure during the war? You know, because we see all the glory of the men winning this battle, and there are a lot of strings of dates, you know, that were important. But what was the real day-to-day life like on the ground? Women, you know, they were made into widows. They were plunged into abject poverty. Their male children were stolen away from them as young as 8 and 10 to fight in the war. And they were the ones that supported the troops and were the quartermasters and supplied the food and traveled with the troops and took care of them, made sure that they were housed, made sure that they set up the camps. And then, of course, they took up arms and they also fought alongside the men. And in many cases, if their husband or whoever it was they were traveling who was in command fell, then they would take up his rifle and command the troops in his place.
Dolores, how would you define the modern Soldadera?
Well, I think that's a very important model, the Soldadera, because again, in the Latino culture, women are pretty much relegated to the home. You know, you go from your father's home to your husband's home, and to take care of your grandchildren when you become older. And so there was really no existing model for the activist woman. You know, you had the Virgin Mary, who was the Guadalupe, who was the very pure person, or the woman who was in the home. And here we have a different model, the Soldadera, somebody who was out there fighting for justice, fighting side by side with the men. And this is, of course, the model that we need in today's world and that we have in today's world. When we see our young women at the colleges or the high schools that are out there marching for immigrants' rights or marching for women's rights. And so this is the Soldadera model that we have today. And we know that we need women out there, because when women, especially the woman in the home, when she set the traditions and the philosophy of the family, and when that family is then committed to social justice, you're going to have the whole family is going to be committed to social justice. And we know that we need women's voices and women's wisdom and women's work to be able to right the wrongs of this world. You know, women need to be in positions of power if we're going to make the major changes that we need, and eventually, if we're going to have peace in the world, we need to have women making those decisions.
You're honoring Dolores, one of the originals, I think, in terms of the Soldadera here in the U.S. and all of the work she's done. How do you feel about this honor? You've had many honors, but you know, you deserve them all. And this one, how do you feel about this?
This is very special
This
to
is
be
your 80th birthday.
to my 80th birthday, and to be honored, of course, at the Mariachi Festival with Linda, whom somebody that I really admire and look up to, is very, very special. But you know, the thing is, for my 80th birthday, what I am trying to promote is, again, this whole idea that we can change things and that we shouldn't give up. Be like the Soldaderas, right? That we know it's a struggle, but that we can't give up, and that we've got to keep working and we've got to keep organizing. And one of the things that I hope to promote with my 80th birthday is to bring all of our movements together. We have a very strong immigrant rights movement, but we're kind of isolated. You know, we had a couple 100,000 people marching in Washington, D.C. just recently on immigrants' rights, got no coverage from the English-speaking press. We had a couple of thousand teabaggers who had a lot of press from the major media. And so we've got to get our other movements, the environmental movement, the women's movement, LGBT movement, we've got to bring our movements together, because in order to achieve the social justice that we need, we have the numbers and we have the people power, but we've got to bring these movements together. And my 80th birthday, I want to use it just to remind people that we have power, but that we've got to take action, that we've got to do it at the grassroots level. The only way that we can make the changes is that we've got to make them. We can't depend on President Obama. We can't depend on anybody else. It's got to come from us from the bottom, and that's what I hope to use my 80th birthday to continue the struggle of the Soldadera.
We have 1 minute.
Oh,
Before,
sorry, I'm running out of time.
no, that's okay. That's who you are, and that's why you do what you do. But what I wanted to ask you about you're going to also be honoring the 50th anniversary of Los Bomberos.
Oh, what a band. Now, see, those guys are the ones more than anything that taught me, because I knew the songs. You know, I grew up with mariachi. We had it for baptisms, we had it for weddings, we had it for whatever, you know, serenades. But, to learn to sing that style as a grown-up professional singer, that took some doing. I had to really, really work hard. And you know, I went over there, I'd come this person, sort of fugitive from American pop music, going, I want to sing the songs I learned when I was a kid because they were better, you know, and they could have really given me an attitude. They really could have, you know, who's this girl? Who does she think she is? She's coming to sing the songs of Lola Beltran and Miguel Aceves Mejia and all these great heroes. And they never did. They just were there like brothers to me. They really helped me. They helped me learn it, even though every single one of those guys can get up on the stage and sing any of those songs better than I can. And they usually can. They get a big star, you know, that the mariachi's backing them, and they're falling all over the place, and the mariachi is always there to support them. If I made a mistake, they were there for me. And Nati Cano is the one that's really tried to keep the traditions alive. They do modern stuff, all the bands do, but he really teaches them. He's got them rooted in the tradition so that when they create their modern you know, interpretation of it, it's got the seed of the original culture really strongly planted in there.
Well, we look forward to them at the festival and to you being honored, Dolores.
They're fabulous.
Thank you.
Well, I think mariachis came from the people, the revolution came from the people, and we've got to continue the tradition of the mariachi and the soldaderas. Sí se puede.
Dolores, among many of the other recognitions that you have gotten, you got an honorary degree from Princeton. And in commending you, they said, through her insatiable hunger for justice, la causa, and her tireless advocacy, she has devoted her life to creative, compassionate, and committed citizenship. Now you're trying to pass that on to other Latinos through the Dolores Huerta Foundation and its Community Organizing Institute. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm kind of going back to the future, going back to the way that Cesar and I organized the Farm Workers Union and the way that we worked in the Community Service Organization, which preceded the United Farm Workers, and you know, getting people together in their homes, making them understand that they have power. And it's something that poor people don't really understand. They think that you've got to be rich or you've got to have a lot of assets, but the message that we have to give people is that the power is in their person. This is all that they need, just their individual human body, along with the bodies of other people coming together. And if all of us form a group, an organization, and then we take action, direct action, we take responsibility with the understanding that nobody is going to change our conditions. We are the only ones that can do it, and that they are the ones that have to act on it. And so if we can get people together in small groups, we convince them to do this, and then eventually great things happen. This is the way that Cesar and I organized the Farm Workers Union. Before that great Delano strike, we had been organizing for 3 years, from 1962 to 1965. So I'm kind of following the same model right now, going back to these immigrant communities where we have our new immigrants that come in. They don't know what their rights are, they don't know what protections they can get, and they also don't realize that they also have responsibilities, and that they don't have to be victims, that they can make changes in their community even if they're not citizens, sometimes even if they're not documented, that just coming together that they can make changes. And it works, and it's a beautiful model. It's hard to explain sometimes because people don't understand that it takes time, it takes patience, and to build that indigenous leadership from communities, people will take leadership if they know that they have an organization to back them up.
That's interesting because it said about the Soldadera that it was her steadfastness that actually won the Mexican Revolution, because if they weren't there to cook those tortillas and do whatever was necessary as well as fight the good fight next to the men, that many of the men would have left the war and gone home. So you being honored as that modern day Soldadera, as you have that same strength of purpose, and I've always had that. It is something that I hear you trying to instill in the Latino community now, that steadfast purpose, that strength, and that recognition of voice.
And I think it's that you have to have faith in people, but you also have to convince them that they have to have faith in themselves, that they have to have faith in their own power, that they can actually make things happen. And in their own strength. And it's very difficult because so often our people see themselves as victims. And they are victims in their community because of all of the terrible things that happen to them. But once that they know that they can actually make things better for themselves. And it takes a little bit of patience, and it takes an awful lot of work. But people will stand up and they will fight for themselves. We saw the farm workers do that. We saw that with the community service organization, where we were able to pass major legislation, like getting ballots in the Spanish language, getting driver's licenses in the Spanish language, getting disability insurance for farm workers, getting the right to register voters door to door, getting unemployment insurance for farm workers, which Jerry Brown signed into law for us after Reagan had vetoed it 3 years in a row, and getting the right to organize for farm workers. But this is all, stuff that was done by the farm workers themselves, marching to Sacramento, going to the state legislature, getting people registered to vote, getting people out to vote, electing good candidates to office, good representatives that are going to really fight for the people. We have the power, people have the power to do that, but we have to convince them that nobody's going to do this for them. They have to do it for themselves. And this is basically what my organization's about. We raise money, we hire organizers, we train them, and then we send them into the community. And each organizer has to meet with 200 people. Then we bring them all together, and then we break it down into neighborhoods. Just recently on the healthcare fight, one of our committees was able to get 2,000 postcards in 2 weeks to send to our Blue Dog Democrat so he could vote for health care. One of our committees passed a bond issue to build a gymnasium at their middle school. Another one of our committees got the funding to build swimming pools in there for the children that they didn't have swimming pools. Another one of our committees, we have 27 homes that didn't have any kind of a sewer drainage system for their homes, where people were bathing with garden hoses in the backyards and putting makeshift latrines. We're talking about California here, not Mexico or somewhere else, California. And now they're going to get a new storm system, sewer drainage, and it's only going to cost them $50 a family. But they did all the work to make it happen.
And are you seeing a lot of women in that fight?
Well, it's interesting in that we start out with males and females, but at the end of the day, all of our leadership is about 95% women. It just happens that way. And then we have a great youth group. Our youth group just had a fundraiser to raise money for the victims of the Haiti earthquake, and they raised $1,000. This is just the youth group themselves. We're doing a big teenage pregnancy prevention program, and we're doing micro-lending programs and financial literacy programs. And the great thing is that once you have all of these different groups that are organized, these communities organized, you can just do a dozen different programs. And the beautiful thing is that volunteers in there doing it. We just knocked on 3,000 doors in one community to remind people to send in their census forms. On one Saturday, we had enough volunteers to knock on 3,000 doors. So we're organizing in Southern Kern County and in Tulare County, the poorest areas of the Central Valley. And if we can raise more money, hopefully we want to create an endowment, then we can hire more organizers, train them, and send them into the rest of our communities. And it doesn't have to be just the Central Valley with farm workers. This can work in Los Angeles, it can work in Oakland, it can work in Hunters Point in San Francisco, it can work anywhere. We just need the funding.
Linda, just as we wrap this up, how do you talk to people about having this voice and standing up, and and particularly women, do you?
Well, I have to talk to myself in the mirror, because like I said, I'm directly descended from Chicken Little, so I wring my hands. And what I really feel most strongly about is that we don't have the luxury of ignoring what's going on in politics, because just writing them off and saying, oh, it's all corrupt. That's a very black and white way of thinking. It's a chicken way of thinking. It's just completely irresponsible, and it's an easy, lazy way of thinking.
Last word here.
You have to get up, dress up, and show up.
Is that what you, okay, and so and you lead by that example.
I'm just going to get there. If I can get out of bed, I can get there.
Okay. Before we go, what is your website?
It's www.doloreshuerta.org. That's DOLORESHUERTA.org.
Very good. And may it live long and prosper as you are doing. Thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.